Hi everyone, Richard here with Shunyata. I wanted to work through setting up a system with our new X products. So behind me on my left, I've got the new Delta X. And in front of me, I've got a variety of X power cables. And what I want to do is just show you how I build the system out for power, and then I build the system out for grounding. Currently in front of me, we also have the Altera ground hub. This is the original ground hub. And then I also have our alpha level ground cables. So we'll work through a couple of steps to power this system up. And one thing I want to note is the level of power cables here that I feel match the Delta X is alpha, but we also have a Sigma X NR dedicated to the integrated Marantz. Sigma is 6 gauge, alpha is 8 gauge. So the larger gauge on the integrated amp, in our opinion, is a huge benefit for current delivery, which really helps with mid to low frequencies, dynamics, and with the depth of sound stage. So we'll get to this, we'll get power running and grounding running, and then we'll get some music playing. So before I get going, I wanted to note a couple of things. Our power distributors, 95% of our power distributors use a C19 or 20 amp connector, which is this one. It's the rectangular connector. When we first started, most other manufacturers used a C15, and the reason we chose a 20 amp is contact integrity and the size of pins is much larger on a C19 or 20 amp connector. And when we're running a power distributor, we need current delivery because multiple components are connected to one device, and this cable becomes the bottleneck. So the larger the gauge, the larger the contact integrity of this connector, the better the current delivery. In addition to that, I also wanted to point out another unique little attention to detail. This piece right here on the end of this cord is kind of representative of why Shunyata is different. And what this is we call it the IEC shim. And if you'll see, it's a sleeve that slides over the IEC connector. Now, the reason we did this is the size of our IEC that we use it's limited by a worldwide code for size. We cannot change the variance of this. However, manufacturers that build products from all around the world will source the inlet from different suppliers. And unfortunately, the variance in the size of the inlet is much wider than the variance in the size of the connector. So what that means is sometimes a customer will buy this cable and they'll call me and they'll say, Richard, it's really tight, but it works. Others will call me and say it's extremely loose. There's a lot of play in it, and that's what this shim is for. This shim is designed to be able to shim or shore up, tighten the connection into the component so you prevent drooping out of the back of each component. This is a simple solution, but it's highly effective, and it's something that we include with every single power cable we sell. So I'll stop talking and I'll get to it. I'm going to start connecting the power cables into the components. One thing I want to note is we're pretty systematic with how we recommend powering up a system. So my first goal is I'm going to connect power to the Delta X. And then I'm going to confirm that all electronics that we will be powering are in the off position. One thing I want to note, there's a switch on the back of our power distributors. It's not a master on-off switch. It is an electromagnetic breaker for overcurrent draw. The design of that breaker is for safety. And the systematic approach to powering up your electronics is recommended to power one up at a time. We want to prevent a massive inflow of current because it stresses your electrical breaker, it stresses your in-wall wiring, and it can stress the breaker of the Delta. So as I power everything up, I'm going to connect the Delta, I'll leave the Delta off, I'll connect all the components, I'll power on the Delta, and then I will power each component on individually. So I'm going to start with the Delta, move to the integrated, and we'll go from there. All right, here I have the Alpha X XC. The XC model does not have noise reduction. It's dedicated to power distributors. This is the larger gauge power cable that I'm dedicating to the integrated amplifier. Improving current delivery to amplifiers really increases dynamic, width and depth of sound stage, and mid to low frequency information, heft and weight. So if you take a close look here, as I move down to the integrated, I want you to be able to see how this IEC shim works. Here's the IEC connector. I'm going to take the shim off. I want to show you how loose it can be in a connector like this. Okay, so it's in. You see the play. What's really interesting is some components, there's no play. So this is it's a problem throughout the industry, but if I remove it, here's the IEC connector. You want the tail, you want these fins facing back so they don't get into the way. So it's on, we'll slide it in here. And once I get in there, if I move it, there's no more play. This shores it up and prevents the cable from drooping or potentially slipping out. I have the Sigma X NR powering the integrated, and one thing I wanted to note, there are 8 outlets on the Delta X and 4 zones. So that means each duplex, each set of 2 outlets is its own zone. And we do this to try to prevent crosstalk with noise between analog and digital components. So I'm going to pick zone 1 for the integrated amp, and as I power other electronics, I'll systematically power them oriented with like components, analog with analog, digital with digital. One cool little note, we have cable cradles to prevent our AC connectors from drooping both at the wall and on the backs of our power distributors. Now, this is a huge benefit for conventional power cords and for our power cables, but sometimes wall warts will need to be connected. In that situation, we just recommend using a small pigtail adapter that can be sourced online pretty inexpensively to be able to power wall warts that are powering less important digital components or ancillary devices. So I've got one more Sigma X NR power cable. If I look at a system like this, I want to prioritize it towards analog, and what I see here is the turntable with the power supply. Turntables are incredibly sensitive to noise reduction and to gauge of power cable. So the fact that I have one more Sigma X NR, the default is prioritizing analog for the better power cables. I'll power the power supply for the turntable with this Sigma X NR. This here's the power cord for the turntable motor. Because of the number of electronics, I'm going to group this with the integrated amp. So what I'm doing is I'm just grouping analog components together. So zone 1 here, I'll power the integrated and I'll power the turntable. I've got 2 more components to go. This is a mixed system of Sigma X and Alpha X power cables. I've prioritized the Sigma X for analog equipment. I'm going to use the lower gauge, which is 8 gauge, instead of 6 on the digital components. Now that we've got everything connected, I'm going to turn the electromagnetic breaker on the Delta X. And then I'm going to systematically power each component on one at a time. I just finished integrating our power system, and it consists of a Delta X, the new Delta X, and our Alpha X and Sigma X NR power cords. I'm going to move over to connecting our grounding system. So within the system, we've got the original Altera and our alpha level ground cables. I will show you how to connect and integrate the Altera into the system so we can integrate power and grounding simultaneously. So here I have an Alpha X ground cable. I'm going to use this between the Altera and the Delta X. So the Altera, depending on the model, the original Altera has 6 ground posts. The new Altera X has 8. Both of them have what we call the earth ground post, and that is the ground post furthest to the side out of the block of component ground connectors. This needs to be connected to earth. It's recommended. In this system, I'm going to connect the Altera to the Delta X. Now maybe you at home, if you want to bring home an Altera ground system to evaluate in your system at home, if you do not have a Shunyata power distributor, we recommend that the Altera connect to the wall outlet. We have a AC wall adapter, and that allows for a banana to connect to the adapter. And that adapter, the only metal piece of the adapter, the only live piece is ground, because what we want to do is we want the Altera to have a reference to ground, and that's going to be at your wall outlet. We do not recommend that the Altera be connected to competitive power distributors based on what they may do within the ground plane of their power distributor. That's not conducive to what the Altera does. Here I am connecting the ground cable to the earth ground post of the Altera, and the other side is going to go back to the Delta X. This ground cable is coming from the Altera's ground post, and I'm going to connect it to the ground post of the Delta X. I'm behind the system right now, and I'm going to connect the Altera to the Marantz integrated. Now lucky, the Marantz integrated has a dedicated ground post. The hierarchy of ground connections, if the component has a dedicated ground post, use it non-stop, full priority to that connection. If it doesn't have a dedicated ground post, we recommend using a chassis screw. Alternatively, if you don't have a ground post or a chassis screw, you can make a connection through a digital or audio input or output, which I'll show you later. I'm going to plug a banana into the Altera hub, and then I'm going to connect this spade to the dedicated ground post on the Marantz. The final ground cable that I will connect is to the Lin streamer. The Lin streamer has a dedicated ground post which we measured for continuity between the middle IEC ground pin and the ground post. Using an analog or digital ohm meter, you can measure continuity for good ground connections on a chassis. This allows us to determine what the best connection is on the back of a component when it comes down to using a ground post or physical chassis screws. So I'll make that connection now. So when evaluating an Altera or even using an Altera, we recommend to use bananas into the back of the Altera. For evaluation purposes, if you bring one of these kits home, banana connections allow for you to do the grounding demo in minutes. I recommend listening to one of your reference tracks. Pick something that you know intimately, really well, and you listen to the track for 30 to 60 seconds, pause it, disconnect the bananas out of the back of the Altera, which looks like this. You play that same track again, don't change the volume, play the same track for another 30 to 60 seconds, pause it, and at that point you're going to ask yourself, am I really hearing what I just heard? And then you come back in and you reconnect all of the ground cables back to the Altera. Now, I marked one of these ground cables with blue tape. The reason I did that, this is our earth connection. This is our earth connection to the Delta. You want to make sure that you plug this one back where it belongs. And then you play the system again for another 30 to 60 seconds. And within 3 to 4 minutes, you can hear immediately the benefits of what Altera grounding does to an audio system.